Yes, hello, folks. Welcome to the twice weekly Manchester United podcast. I hope you're all doing well. This is, of course, your regular host and co-host Phil Brown with James Rhodes. Jamesy, how you doing, mate?
Doing well, doing well. And you this week, how you doing?
Been really busy, mate.
Yeah.
You know, in good, healthy ways. Just my 18-year-old son, of course, has left school,
hmm
and of course, his idea of leaving school is now to sit in his arse all summer.
Oh man, some summer is rough. This is the first summer for me. My son, he's much younger, 6, but he
Mm.
finished kindergarten. Last time we still had daycare all the way through like July, and
Mhm.
so we had gave him a few weeks off. But this is the first summer we've had as a parents where it's like 10 weeks of nothing, and I'm like, it's chaotic, man. It's hard to focus and
You know
stay.
what's funny, man? Like, I look at my kids. I don't know, like, obviously different generations. Two words you never ever uttered in my house was "I'm bored," because what would come next would be some assigned task from absolute hell that I knew quickly we're not bored. My kids are
Yes.
sitting there with iPads, Xboxes, every Disney app, everything, go karts, everything.
Right. Oh
And
man.
we, maybe because we didn't have anything, Ginsey, because we had to create our own fun.
Mm.
Sometimes you can have everything and have nothing. You
Yeah,
just have
yeah.
too many choices, and you forget how to, play games with each other, be creative. But once I get my kids, once I give my kids my attention, and if I
Mhm.
want to sit down and draw cuts, it's amazing, mate. Like how quickly they
Oh,
abandon
man.
their
They
electronics.
they all abandoned
Yeah.
all of that shit for that, and it's funny because I feel like when we were kids, because we didn't have it, like you said,
Hmm.
we would leave anything to go play video games if we got a chance, because it was, like, such a rare
Yeah, it was
opportunity.
such a
But
yeah.
it is interesting to have access to it now, and 100% your kids would rather spend time with you.
But it's
It's kind of
also
a
a
nice
lesson
thing,
to
isn't it?
us, like, put the
Yeah.
phone down.
Yeah, for
Put
sure.
whenever my kids come and ask me something, if I put my phone down, give them my undivided attention, the gratitude that they have for that, the
Yeah.
laugh, just playing with them, and um, you know, just quickly, the internet was supposed to bring us closer together, and it's never brought us further apart. It was
Mhm.
supposed to integrate us more with the intersectional of ideas, and now it's never brought us further apart. All this surveillance, so our kids can't get lost. They have fewer freedoms than what you and I had, and it just
Yep.
seems like everything's having the opposite effect. And yeah, it's interesting because when I have my summers off, I wasn't in the house, but for these kids, it's
Same.
different.
Yep.
But all right, Manny, let's talk about United. Lots, of course, to talk about on the podcast.
Yes.
Um, one of the things that broke yesterday, James, was the ticket price surge. Now, the last time there was a ticket price issue, I had clumsily commented on it. That I had to correct the next podcast because I hadn't done the requisite due diligence on some of the nuances and subtleties of it. I want to do this its due diligence and give it its justice, its respect it deserves. So we'll cover that
Yep.
more on Monday
Yep.
when I have time to go through it and
Yeah,
speak to
both of
people
us.
and perhaps bring somebody on Monday or sometime next week to talk about this from one of the respective organizations that, of course, speak for many different people on this particular topic. So we will give that our due diligence and respect. We'll cover that more on Monday. We'll talk about, of course, Omar Berrada's interview with Andy Mitten. Once again, fantastic work from Andy, but also whatever you think, James, whatever you think of any of us, and I've been one of the biggest critics. You have to respect the fact that they talk.
Yep.
They're willing to sit down and speak to things. United we stand.
Mhm.
Fanzine, not some sanitized corporate media where they're
Yep.
going to pitch softball questions. They're willing to sit down and talk.
And
Jim
I think
Ratcliffe,
Andy mentioned no same with Jim Ratcliffe, no preparation, no
right,
pre-approved questions. They just free interview without having to, like
right.
you say, like just color only in between the lines. You can kind of ask them whatever. I do think that is admirable and not something you get or that we got for 20 years, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, no, so commend them for at the very least having dialogue and communication. Nick Cox is about to leave the football club, of course, has an opportunity to go to Everton. And this is, from what I understand, a mutual, amicable situation. Of course, Nick has been at United for 9 years, done a fantastic job. Adam Lawrence also left
Yep.
a month or so ago, who was, of course, the one of the coaches at the under-18 level. He done a fantastic job, of course, with the under-18s, if you look at what they accomplished last year. So it's going to be interesting to see what United do to replace two key individuals who've done a fantastic job. I would talk about, of course, some news that broke while I was in bed about United getting much closer on Mbumo, being very confident that they will be able to agree on the parameters of a deal, which is exciting, and one or two other things. Perhaps if Mbumo signs, James, United could be in a situation in December, January of losing Onana, Mbumo, Ahmad, Mazraoui to the AFCON, which is in December, January. So those would be big losses for United, but nonetheless, these are the very, very important tournaments for that region, that continent, and it's as important as any competition that's played in football. So it should be given its
100%.
due respect. Big long-winded intro, mate. So let's talk about first the Omar Berrada interview. Give me your excerpts from it, your highlights.
Yeah, I mean, I think that he's obviously like a very, I mean, he's pretty honest and direct on it. I think, you know, the biggest things that I kind of gathered from it, that I, at least is my hope from what he was saying, because it aligned with the things that I was expecting or hoping. You know, when we talked about Sir Dave Brailsford leaving United recently and taking a step back, my take on it was probably a good thing that you have things in place. Kind of the chaotic period is sort of should be over at United, and at least a stable team. And the biggest takeaway I got from that is Omar Berrada kind of talked about that quite a bit and saying the same things. He talked about bringing Amorim in early and why that was done, and the benefit that they gained from that. But he also said, look, we have the executive team now, we have the technical team now, we have the coaching team now. It's actually all settled, and we've had these at least months of season with the coach now added into it to lead up to our assessments this summer and getting the job done. And so for me, that's my positive take on the whole thing, is that they understood that it was kind of chaotic, right? Like that it was a mess for a bit here, but that they do feel that they're pretty well settled at the major levels of the club at this point in time, and in alignment, you know, from him probably as the CEO on down, through Ruben Amorim. And that was my main kind of takeaway, is that that's been a lot of their focus, rather than necessarily worried about like this game or that game, or the, you know, results. And obviously that's been hard to deal with, you know. You know, he used the word suffering a lot, that Ruben Amorim also used in that. And I'm certainly, it's been I've been suffering. I'd like some damages potentially paid to me for that, because I've been suffering too, and I'm not paid nearly as well. So yeah, those were kind of my main takeaways. And I guess I tend to have obviously a fairly optimistic view on things, but that's my main takeaways from the whole thing, is just that a lot of the chaos should be settled now and moving forward. And I do think it reflects to a degree in, you know, on sitting here June 19th with Cunha, with Mbumo, with the business being kind of done so far in the summer, that at least there's a clear continuity between them right now. Whether there was before or not, definitely there wasn't, but at least there's something, you know, that they've been preparing for this season, and all of that.
Look, I have no doubt there's consensus on, you know, the goals, the defined stated goals, and I think I mentioned this before, that it's healthy that there's, you know, diversity viewpoint on exactly how to get there. We all
Sure.
agree
Yeah.
this is what the definition of success is. This is the goal we're all working towards. Okay, well, we all have different ideas on what the best way to get there is. This is really, really important. So if there's disagreement at board level on key issues, that
Yeah.
tells me that it's a healthy board, right? So this is not an exact science. So
Sure.
this is something that, people can speak about with confidence. You can have opinions on whether, someone's right or someone's wrong. And that's fine. But, there are certain characteristics that show up in success wherever you're talking about that have to be present. Environment is one of them. To me, his biggest role, James, biggest priority number one is to create a football club that is a place where they're going to remove every impediment to development and
Right.
to success, wherever it may be, no matter what the cost is, right? And that's what you do when you set very clear defined goals. We talk about, before we get on to the fixture list, because I think this is going to have a pivotal role on what happens next season, how we start. I'm a subscriber to United We Stand. I have been for a long time. I highly recommend everyone else do it. You get a digital one delivered to your phone, or you can have a hard copy. But fanzines in general are one of the best informed United media publishers or any media outlet that you can invest in. I highly recommend it. I haven't read all the Berrada interview yet because I want to be able to read it in pace, where I'm not reading it and getting interrupted every 5 seconds and every 5 seconds and every 5 seconds. And when you have a house with 4 kids, you have to make an appointment to get an uninterrupted hour. So I've read bits and pieces of it. And as I said, look, I'm encouraged that someone is having stated goals that they can be held accountable for.
Yeah.
Okay, it might seem unrealistic to say we want to win the league in 2028, but that's still our stated goal. That to me is something I can work with, because now I can hold you accountable. Instead of just saying we have to improve what? That's just some nebulous nonsense. Like, give me very specific stated goals that I can hold you accountable for. And I'm encouraged by how open Berrada is. I'm encouraged by how sensible he is. And I'm encouraged by the fact that I do believe he understands what the anatomy of success looks like.
Yeah, I would agree. And like you said, there's so many different ways potentially that you can go about achieving that, right? And so many different opinions that can be made on football, on style, on signings, on all the actual that kind of thing. But what comes first invariably is that you have to prioritize winning. There's always going to be different routes to get there, but you have to prioritize winning and have a clear, concise way of doing it. And like they said, it's not just like a nebulous 3 years we want to win the league type of statement, but quite literally they've got a goal in mind, and that means they've actually made plans. So like you think of things like the transfer market, you can have different opinions on who to buy, who to get, who this, all that. But I think the most important thing is that, kind of how they stated, they have an idea for the squad. So they're not going to make decisions on a whim off of some completely separate motivation that don't lead you in that direction, whether they get it right or wrong, whether people like a signing, don't, these things, these are all the opinions at play. But there has to be that plan. And then the plan either works or it doesn't, right? But without without that exact thing of this is where we're going and this is how we get there, the rest can't happen. It's a hierarchy of decision making that has to be, happening in any project to occur, or any plan that you have laid out. There has to be a goal in it for it to work. And if you don't know what that goal is clearly, or that goal is in conflict with other people's goals, then that's not going to happen. So at least at that level on down, I think there is a very, very clear direct goal. And that certainly was not always the case in the past.
Yeah, look, it's still a particularly, nascent department, organization, process. And, we shouldn't disrespect it and think that just because you come in 12 months, everything should look completely different. Because a lot of the first 12 months is diagnostics and demolition.
Yep.
And as we've seen, it takes 5 seconds to demolish something. It can take decades to build something, right? Which is much harder. And let's also be honest, James, success and continued success has an element of alchemy to it, right? Like, because it's not an exact science, City should never have had the season they had if they had the magic formula of success, right? All it
Yep.
takes is one building block to fall out,
Yep.
and then it can look horrendous if it's in a key important building block. And it's not that easy to replace them because the variables continuously change every day. United can't replicate the process they had under Ferguson to be successful today,
Correct. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So now you have to come up with something that's consistent, commensurate with modern day of situations and circumstances. So
Yep.
it's hard. And as we've said before on this podcast, if you look at United's 146-7-year history, we're talking about two managers that have had sustained, consistent success at the very
Yep.
top.
Yep.
United have had obviously successful managers that have done great things, but we're talking about Sir Matt Busby and Sir Alex Ferguson. Sir Matt Busby played for Liverpool and City, was offered a job at Liverpool before he went to United, came to United. He wasn't someone that got the club. He was someone that, just came in, completely revolutionized the football club. In my opinion, the greatest manager ever lived, because I don't think he ever gets enough credit for the fact that his team was wiped out in 1958, almost lost his life, and within a decade won the European Cup. I mean, just imagine even managing a football, even if one player died, how difficult it would be to go back and do that. The mental resilience, everything just unbelievable. But to me, I think success is really, really hard. It's harder when the Premier League is now so exceptionally well run, so high, the margins for error are so small. So, in their defense, this is hard.
Yeah, it is hard. And it may not be, again, overnight. And I think that they've faced that reality and kind of have dealt with it. But I do also think that what's really important, and I do think they get this, is that from this point on, it has to be up. Everything has to start going up. Everything has to start trending up. And that's kind of like what you're saying, like that, I think the demolition is over. You have to see building happening. It can't sit demolished now. You have to see real building happening moving forward, and there has to be good evidence of that month by month, year by year. We have to see that now. And I think that's, that process can be slower, it can be longer, but we have to see the direction of that being the right way now.
Yeah, the direction of travel has to be in the opposite directions. It has to be build momentum. Look, United have a difficult fixture list at the start. Now, there's multiple ways of looking at this. There's one way of saying, look, it's better to play these teams before they hit form and hit rhythm. And, this is probably the most vulnerable time for them to play. And once you play these teams October, November, the probability is they're going to be in much better form than United. And that's going to be a harder game. However, Amorim is not in a position, James, and nor are United, to where a really bad start is superable. I mean, United are going to find themselves in a difficult situation where the atmosphere, the darkness, and it's going to have it's going to transcend last season, and it's just, I worry about that. The other side of it is if they get off to a really good start, where they scalp one or a couple of these teams, don't lose, then you're talking about, to me, something that you can't buy in a transfer market, something that you can't curate as a result of a process. This is something that is a consequence of winning games of football, and the only thing that can do that is winning games of football. It will change the belief, it will change the atmosphere inside the football club, it will change momentum, and that is, to me, something that gives you the confidence and the belief to have a really, really good season.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting because it's almost like an opportunity in there, right? Because you get this chance to turn around from what was a horrible season with a fresh start, and if you get something positive out of it, and it's not like you have to win every single game, but you get something positive out of the start of this year against these tough teams, you will go away with it feeling we can do something. We can do something with this. We can get somewhere. And we need it, and and there's it. I've gone back and forth as well on the thought of like, okay, is the start of this next season being difficult a good thing or a bad thing? The one positive that you can take away is that very often other teams can be slow starters too, even the good ones. They can be slow starters, even if they're better. It can take them a bit to get going. I would say it's probably easier to beat Arsenal in August than it is in February, for example. And I would say maybe the same would go for any of the top teams, just because they may be still in the market for some of the things that they need to do, and that's where, of course, United side of it, they need to be early, and I think you prepare to have a good start this week. You prepare to have a good start this coming season, not this week rather, but by getting things done now. The longer you have to train, the longer you have to prepare, the longer you have to be ready, the more advantage you can get over the other clubs. And that's why it is important they do things efficiently, especially with the problems we've seen with the new manager, because there's an ability here to take advantage of this opportunity and get a fast start and be more ready than the opposition when the season comes, to hit the ground running. And you can steal a march in that way, and build up that confidence, and they need it. They need the confidence. We've seen that, the mentally, I think, has been the biggest problem they've had. The end of the season, all the games being lost and all of that, you could see that there's just mentally there was, maybe not a weakness, but an acceptance that they weren't going to be winning those games, and that has to be broken early and quickly in the next season.
Yeah, this is something that's going to be really interesting, and you'll see it in the first game. I don't expect we will. I think United will be competitive. I think United will, have intensity. They'll come out with belief. But if they fall behind by a goal or two, how quickly are we going to see surrender?
Right. Yeah.
Because we've seen that in a lot of games. If we see that in
Hmm.
the first game, James, I would really worry for
For
Amarim.
sure. For sure.
If we see a situation in the first game where there's an obvious quality gap, where United lose the game 1 or 2-0, and have one shot on target, that's going to worry me.
Yep. Yep.
Because these are the things that Amarim, whether it's fair or not, can't bring into next
Yeah.
season. He's not asked to win
Yeah.
the league. He's not even asked to finish top four. But these are the things that, characteristically his team can't exhibit. And so, to me, I don't know how you get that camaraderie and unity in a team whenever you're collectively working together. You get fragmented, individual surrender when some players already want to leave, and some players, have wanted to leave but didn't get to leave, and other players, are just fed up with what's going on, and all the stuff that can't be brought into the season. And I don't know if you can erase that, James, without winning games of football. You do that.
Yeah.
That's, to me, a human characteristic of demoralization,
Yep.
and that's I think this is going to be Amarim's biggest challenge, is changing the mindset of this team, where they're mentally resilient and trust themselves to win games when they fall behind.
Yeah, I would agree, and that's what kind of has to get the ball rolling on next season.
Are you
Regardless
offended
of
to lose?
everything else. Yeah,
It's just a simple
exactly.
question. Are
Exactly.
you offended to
Yeah.
lose? If you're not offended to lose, there's clubs that will take you. That's okay. You can look me in the eye and say, we're not good enough. We're not, they have more money. They have better resources. But look, all I'm asking for you to do is to make sure there's no variance or disparity between the things that can't be bought. Let's make sure the intangibles we aren't lacking in. We're not lacking in professionalism. We're not lacking in commitment. We're not lacking in fitness. None of these things have anything to do with how much money you have. Let's make sure that we're not lacking in professionalism. We're matching their regret. All these things that have to do with the human being before we talk about money. And if you do that, there's a high probability that not everyone on the other team is going to be doing that. And
Yeah.
you will win games, because we've seen it how many times where talent loses to commitment, where talent loses to hard work, where talent loses to, you know, people that are willing to put effort in, camaraderie, unity, all that stuff, the intangibles, like we say. Those are the things I don't forgive. United players must bring that to the table.
Yes, I agree. Totally. And that's what I think as a fan I'd be happy with, just to see that United is a team that has that actual fight, that looks like they really want to win every game. And I hate to always reference it because the accusations of being a Liverpool fan started years ago, but I think it's something that when Klopp came in to rebuild Liverpool, you did see very quickly was they had that fight, the passion, whatever you would call it, every single game, even when they were poor, even when they had mistakes, even when they weren't winning yet. You could see it pretty quick, and that has to be happening this year. That is the thing that I think will give people a lot of faith in the club, outside the club with the fans, and Amorim and the direction that we're heading very quickly.
Yes. I mean, yeah, that's going to be something that he's also going to need help with from any of us. As we mentioned on the intro here, Nick Cox is leaving the football club. He's been
Yep.
at United 9 years, exceptionally successful time, responsible for really completely revamping United's youth academy project, and how poorly they were underperforming prior to that. I think, to be fair, Woodward had also put an emphasis on that too
Yeah,
late, mind you.
Murtaugh too, to be fair as well.
Yeah, with Murder, but I
Yeah.
think he did it too late, but nonetheless.
Yeah.
Um, so Nick Cox is someone that has been extremely successful. James done a fantastic job. You look at United's performances at youth level. Recent years it's been exceptional. We've got young players coming through that provide enormous optimism, and this is going to be a big loss and difficult to replace.
Yeah, and look, I want to make definitely very clear that I think it's been a huge improvement under Nick Cox as well, and he's taken a step up, essentially up the ladder. I mean, going from United to Everton, it's not like going to a bigger club, but it is a much bigger role direction that he'd be taking, over there. And so it makes a lot of sense for him to take the kind of step up, having been successful. So that's good for him on that and being recognized for the success that he has had. And obviously wish him all the best in that. One thing that I would say is that I'm not particularly worried about it. And that's, again, like I said, not an insult to his performance, but simply because this would be something where I would say we've seen some decent evidence so far. And of course, Jason Wilcox ran probably the most successful academy in England over the time that he was there in Manchester City, in terms of producing talents and things like that. So obviously there's an experience that they have, at least, that they'll know how to put this together. They have gotten a lot of this kind of fringe youth recruitment right, like we've seen with Cheeto, like we've seen with Kone, like we've seen with Aiden Heaven. These have been really encouraging things that they've done, where I think we can all kind of agree they've got that stuff really right, even from the offset. So it's definitely a loss, and I hope that they can find someone of requisite quality. But I do think we have the right people in place to ensure that the academy doesn't falter. Sure, certainly, I don't think it's an area they'll take their eye off of, because it's definitely something they have as a focus. So I don't expect it to degrade here moving forward, but it's definitely going to be something they
Yeah,
need to fix and replace him.
I think one of the key things that United did was to make sure that there was major structural changes. So if a member of staff
Yep.
leaves, everything doesn't leave with them.
Yeah.
So, which of course is what you're supposed to do. And so I think United are much better positioned to be able to deal with that departure.
Yep.
You have to expect that at this level, James. When you excel at this
Yeah.
level, you still got a couple of layers to go.
Yeah.
Most people, when they excel at this level, are going to get picked off in other roles at
Yep.
clubs, and you have a choice: either you promote them or you lose them. And if you promote them, you take them out of this position anyway. So this is something that rarely, 9 years is, if you're doing an exceptional job, 9 years,
Yeah.
that's decent tenure, and you should be expecting to be, to lose that individual if they're doing a really good job. Um,
Yeah, I mean,
it,
Jason Wilcox is the current director, was the academy director at City, and then, for 4 or 5 years, and then he went off to Well, he was an under 18s manager, then academy director. Then he got picked off to go to Southampton. It wasn't like to go to a huge club, but to go to be their director. So these things happen. Yeah, it's like there are always going to be people making that step up in football if they do a good job, and I think that's not a bad thing. It's a sign that you've got a good person and a decent setup that can be successful. So there's something to prepare for.
Ben Jacobs reporting earlier, James, that United are extremely confident of agreeing verbally, at the very least, the parameters of Mbumo. It seems that they've been really confident throughout this process. I understand there's some people getting a bit impatient. Personally, I'm not. These people are on holiday, everything else. They need to have a break from football. Everyone does. And obviously, when you look at United's rivals, people are getting a bit impatient. But this is one I would expect United will get done. And I've never really, in my mind, had, maybe I'm overconfident, but had any doubt that it'll get done.
Yeah, me too. For a lot of the factors involved, one in that they got the players' commitment to join them over other clubs. Generally speaking, what clubs will try to do and what can make things difficult is really just if other competition comes in, as we've seen with certain other targets. But once you get that commitment, it makes it a lot harder for other clubs to maintain a firm negotiating stance where they can hold out forever. Brentford have talked about already that they would sell him this summer. There's really nobody else that is willing to make a bid for him at this point, given his commitment towards joining United, which is pretty firm. And they're not that far off financially off of a deal. It's structures and things like that, and some of the slowness is just like these things happen. I mean, especially at this time in June, like you say, people are on holiday, people take time off, and you also have to bear in mind that the football transfers thing is an economy. It's a big, giant, interconnected economy. When half the teams are over in the Club World Cup and half of them are on vacation, and then you have the June 30th PSR thing where a lot of clubs are, fiddling with their finances and figuring out their numbers and doing all that before this deadline. You get this little bit of like lull that can happen here in the middle. That's all that's going on. I wouldn't expect that it'll be overnight that it's completed, but I do feel very, very confident as well from everything I've heard that there will be a deal reached at the end of the day to get it done, and that it's truly in the best interest of all parties for that to happen.
Well, it's quite interesting because people have not been slow to point out that the likes of, Quenda and Gyökeres did not want to follow Ruben Amorim, but for some reason that doesn't extend to Bruno wanting to follow Thomas Frank to Spurs and
Right.
actually rather come to Manchester United. It seems that he can still be very complimentary about his coach that got him to this point, but not be shamed for wanting to do something else. Apparently he had some favor, but so that's an indictment on. I don't think that's an indictment on Thomas Frank. If anything, I don't know, understand how that people have correlated that.
It's never is. I mean,
Memory.
talking about players have very short careers. Actually, at the end of the day, they get maybe 14, 12 to 15 years at the top level. So they're maybe getting 3 contracts. Their chances to make a big move comes once in their career, very often. And if they get that wrong, it can be, devastating essentially in that respect in terms of what happens. So you're not making the decision based on a manager. Ruben Amorim is probably going to have a much longer managerial career than Gyökeres. Thomas Frank is going to have a much longer managerial career than Mbeumo will be a player. Like, it's not an insult when players don't follow the guy. I mean, look, all these players that Xabi Alonso has been training when ended up going to Liverpool, and Liverpool people are going to to Madrid. It's like, who knows? All sorts of these things happen in this carousel. But yeah, it's certainly nothing against Thomas Frank for that.
If I'm a manager and a player sitting across from me saying, I'm only signing for you, I don't want you.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing. I want you to play for your family first. I want you to play for your community and the people in your community who didn't get this opportunity. I want you to play for the shirt. I want you to play for the fans. If you're playing for me, then that's going to resemble what human relationships resemble: up, down, up, down. One day I like you, one day I don't want. No, don't play for me.
Yeah,
You
what
play
if you
for your
don't get
club.
on at one point?
Yeah.
Discipline issues happen.
Well,
Reprimanded one time, then you don't like the manager. Then who are you? What's your
well,
motivation?
yeah, if a team loses a game, players have no problems letting the manager take responsibility. But I've
Yeah.
never once seen a player after scoring a hat trick going, you know what? I owe everything to Ruben Amorim, because if it
Right.
wasn't for Ruben, we owe all the glory goes to Ruben. No, when the defeats come, not my fault. But you know what? I was
Mm.
the one that scored that hat trick. The manager's responsible for the losses, just not the wins. Yeah, I know. This is the way people are. I would be the same from a footballer, but yeah, I don't want footballers the same for managers. I want footballers the same for a football club, not a team. I want them to embrace everything that's important about that, and not just play for a manager. So,
Yep.
yeah, it's
Okay.
uh. Ekitike, my friend. So it looks like United. It's interesting about Ekitike because the number being quoted is exceptionally high, right?
Mhm.
That not a realistic high, not a realistic number. It's way too high. There's confidence allegedly amongst Premier League teams that they could get him for below the €100 million. I would hope there's confidence. Buyer clause,
Well,
Jesus.
nobody's getting him at 100 million, so it's
Now,
it's it's, it's
well,
lower or nothing.
yeah, but imagine coming back. Well, boss, I got them down 100 million to 95 for Ekitike. Okay, you're a real wheeling dealer, aren't you?
Yeah.
Fucking hell. Oh, Bernie Madoff here. Look at this lad. Oh, Jesus Christ. But no, I mean, there seems to be confidence that they can get him out for significantly less than that. I would hope so. But even at 85, James, he's still significantly beyond United. I mean, to me, if it's 40 million, fine. But why are you inquiring about strikers that you know Eintracht Frankfurt are setting some unrealistic expectation of 100 million, probably expecting to get somewhere like 70, but he's not even a 70 million pound player to me, or Euro striker to me.
No, no, I don't think he is. And look, my information on it from the beginning has been that it's probably been played up quite a bit because, Frankfurt have Liverpool on the hook for him. They have Chelsea on the hook for him. They're trying to raise a competition. They already sold Marmoush to City in January for a significant amount of money. So they're not in a financial position where they particularly need to sell. They're not in a rush. They don't need to balance the books. They hold every single card in this negotiation. They'd probably be happy not selling him, because if he has another good season, someone will come back next summer and pay a bunch of money too, and they'll still have their striker that they've got. My understanding of it has been, United wouldn't value him over 60 million euros or so. Like, and even then, I think it would be structured in that sense. That's been my understanding kind of since day one. But also, I would just add to it that my understanding was it was really quite basic in terms of the inquiries over, what's his price, what does it look like, what does the deal look like, and that it wasn't particularly with the intention to go and start pursuing it. And I don't think that they are pursuing it at this time. I'm not saying that they couldn't go back and look at it, but I think it's as simple as they've left it at asking a few questions and then, all right, well, we'll see what happens with that whole thing later on. And I was listening to David Ornstein yesterday about this, and he said pretty much the exact same thing on that, which was, that just because they've asked about it doesn't mean they're gonna try to sign him. And and it's probably something, even though the striker position at this point, given everything that's happened, is something they'll probably just look at later on, and kind of wait out a little bit while they work on sales and things like that after Imbumo. So it's still ridiculous to me because we've talked about this before. The inflated prices of all these young players is just absolutely out of control, and it's gone insane. It's gone mental. Young players, I understand there's a cost for potential, but that cost has to be in between the player that they are today. It has to be somewhat near that. You can't pay the full price for what they have a 10% chance of becoming. These prices have to be significantly lower.
Yeah.
And and in general, I'm not really high on United pursuing or wanting to get a project striker again in any sense, because it's like it's just they need something that solves the problem. They need somebody who's ready and the shirt can wear. And I look at someone like Ekitike, who's a very talented player. He had a really hard time at PSG. He's had one failed move at a big club already in his career. Really struggled with it, then was left out of the team. Had some issues with mental health surrounding these types of things. And that's not an insult. It's just these are the difficulties that it takes. It weighs heavy on young players when they make a big move. It's not that easy, and the pressure is high, and it's even higher at United. And I definitely would say there's risks in any young signing on big money. The price tag
Yeah.
matters, and it makes it worse when the more you pay.
Look, here's the thing, James. When you're looking at a young footballer, the people at the very top, the people that make the money, they're able to one appraise, and be able to scale a player's potential. Say this is their ceiling.
Yeah.
They're able to scale their propinquity in the current moment to that particular, to that particular potential ceiling. Okay, they're this far away or that far away. And they're also able to calculate within reasonable accuracy the probability that they'll reach that potential. But that is very, very difficult to do when you're talking about the human mind. I mean, I can't even explain why I just used the sentence that I did. I didn't sit and think about every word that I said and think about all the potential other words that I could have said, then decided on that word. So your brain is doing so much that you're not even consciously aware. I mean, most of us don't even know why we believe the things we believe, or that we have habits, or why we do. This is when you're talking about the human mind, and your potential and the realization of potential and progress depends so much on psychological unpredictable factors that the probability is most players, most human beings will not reach their full potential because they're just going to have other issues that are going to prohibit that. So it's really difficult. United don't develop a lot of players to top level. Well, no, this is the typical trajectory of most players. Most players are going to have exciting potential, but out of the exciting potential, maybe 10% of them are going to reach world-class level. The rest are just going to remember as a young hype. I remember Barco at Brighton. Everyone was raving about him. What happened to that kid? This next stage in your development is fraught with so many difficulties because of the maturation changes of a young man from 18 to 20s, of the physiological changes, everything else. It's really difficult.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. It is very difficult, and I think that United can't afford as a team to be in a situation where, I wouldn't say we're stable enough that I would feel confident in it working. I think there's a point when you can get young players and platform them and all of that, and I think the ideal time is when you have protection. It's like when you would have signed Rasmus Højlund, when you would have had Harry Kane to play in front of him, and you were able to take someone out of that firing line, and you're able to reduce the amount of weight that weighs on somebody, and give them that way out that isn't just failing and being and feeling as though they haven't made it. They're it's really, really difficult to get past that. So
the other thing is, James, there is so much mythological bullshit out there, right?
Yeah.
you can develop mental strength or character in a human being. Absolute and utter bullshit. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I don't know. If that was true, veterans wouldn't be blown their head off at a rate of 4 a day. This is nonsense. The idea that if I just expose you to enough suffering, it'll develop some type of mental resilience. This is total nonsense. And of course,
usually it's just the trauma piles up and piles up and piles up and weighs on people further. Yeah.
I've seen coaches in scrimmage games, make kids do laps for losing. When does the coach do laps? When do you ever say to you, since this is the best way of learning and the most effective way of learning, does the coach ever turn around at the end of that game and say, hey, I fucked up, lads, let me do 6 laps here? Never.
Yeah.
Oh, exposing you to suffering is the best way to learn in any heuristic or whatever. Okay, does that apply to you? No, not to me. It applies to you.
Yeah.
No, I'm going to make sure you do, not me.
Yep.
You cannot develop mental resilience through suffering. Okay? And nobody in human history has ever been able to teach mental toughness because nobody even knows what it is.
Yep.
Is it you do weightlifting? Right? What this is bullshit. Oh well, don't expose people. If you're not suffering, you're not a mom. Well, absolute nonsense. This is the people that speak are the most insecure, desperate to project an image of male masculine, toughness that they're clearly anything but. Anyway, these young men are criticized for being man. Oh, they're just so weak today, and all this is bullshit.
Yeah.
Every week, the impact on these players that make their development so much more difficult is the vector of the internet and
Yep.
social media that has 100% had a negative impact on human development, not just footballers, but in life.
Yep.
And so we can't compare it and contrast it to years gone by in the past. And that is to the benefit of people in previous generations who didn't live under this type of surveillance and scrutiny, that were able to make mistakes privately without it affecting their career. So, this ban potential at a club like United, when it can get dark so easily, is
Yep.
really risky. We need leaders. I know we promised we would get into questions, Lindsay, but I didn't coordinate them. They're all over the place. There's some on social media, there's some in emails, there's some here and there. So we will get that shit together and get those done.
And we can do it on Monday, and we can be ready
Yeah.
for that too. That's totally okay, because there's no game, so it's not like Monday has to be a post-match type of talk. So that's okay as well, for sure.
There was a couple of James he needed to run by his lawyer first before answering, so didn't want to self-incriminate, But all right, folks, listen. Thanks for all of you tuning in. Do we have anything else, Lindsay, before we go?
A couple little things I could mention here real quick on the stories. Number one, obviously, like we talked about in Mbeumo a bit in the progress on there. We've talked a little about on the striker. The main thing United are working on at the moment is sales, and there's some progress on that front. I can definitely say there's been progress on the front of moving Antony on over Betis. They really do want him. They've had plenty of discussions between the two clubs in recent times. It's a move he would like. Probably be a somewhat complicated, messy sort of thing, but I think it'll work out in the end, that they can find some kind of structure of a deal that will work. And I think that's a win for all parties. Something like that happens. But in terms of, even the worries over slowness and things like that, these are the things that need to happen, even though they're not exciting, that they have to get some of these players moved on and free up wage space and free up squad spots and free up some funds to continue moving forward. So a lot of work's been done on that, and I do know they've been pretty proactive on a few of these players in signings. And I did want to ask you one other question, because we spoke one time not that long ago about Emi Martinez. And it looks kind of like Onana's probably going to stay, and I think that the difficulty has been obviously in terms of that is there a buyer? And it seems as though, if they were to move Onana on, that Emi Martinez would probably be someone that they would bring in, though it seems kind of unlikely. What do you think about it? And I just want to ask one more thing on that, and as a follow-up question to it, Aston Villa have some difficulties financially. Is there any route here that maybe part of the attraction to a deal like this could be as well, that there might be players Aston Villa wants from United that could sort things out too?
Well, to me, if you go with Onana next season, this is to me like racing a car on ball tires.
Mm-hmm.
You better make sure they don't blow.
Right.
And if they blow up on the first lap, you have a massive, massive problem.
Yep.
This is a massive gamble.
Yep.
And if we look at Onana's body of work at United, there's never been a period when he's looked like a Man United goalkeeper. We've had moments where you've had, great save here, great save there, maybe 2 or 3 games, but that's not a Man United goalkeeper. So I'm not quite sure how anyone could look at Onana's 2 years at United and have the confidence to justify a third. Like, to me, he could turn out to be, an exceptional goalkeeper next season, but possibility and probability are very different things. So high probable is that, not high. That decision, if it's wrong, will cost Ruben Amorim's job, right? To me, 100%. So I don't care what your aerodynamics are. I don't care what your speed capacity is. I don't care if you've got the best driver in the world. If you're driving on ball tires, none of these things matter, right? Because all of these things are contingent upon you obviously having that structural integrity. As for potential player swaps and being involved in moves and stuff, this is contingent upon a respective player wanting to go to Aston Villa.
Yep.
And I don't know the answer to that question, or maybe I don't know. Not for me to speak, but it would all depend on whether the player player in question wanted to go to Aston Villa.
Yeah.
And, I don't know the answer to that question, but I also think that for United, the players who might go to Aston Villa are players they would want to sell in a cash deal, not in a swap deal.
Yeah. Well, and bear in mind, that's what I was
But yeah,
thinking.
I'm
Like,
sure they could sell him as a 40 million cash deal, and then
Yeah.
Emi
Yeah.
Martinez would come to United or whatever,
Yeah.
something like that. Or if it was
Yep.
Garnacho or Anthony or Rashford or whatever, I'm
Yep.
sure
Yeah.
they obviously this is what clubs do. We've seen this last season. Chelsea and Newcastle did it, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think that it's
Do
really
you think he's an
interesting.
improvement, Emi Martinez over Onana? Because I think my view on it was he's an improvement, but for the costs,
Yeah,
perhaps it feels like a lot for an older keeper. But I don't know. Do
he's
you
an
think he's an
improvement.
improvement? Yeah.
Well, there's two parts. Is he improvement or is he a Man United goalkeeper?
Right.
There's two different answers.
Yeah.
Right? And so I don't know because I just don't see too many obvious alternatives. I
True.
suppose we'll have to wait and see what Florian Plettenberg says, who somehow all of a sudden became very, very informed once Christian Vivel came. I don't know. Somehow he become very, very involved all of a sudden. Just this immediate jump from Bundesliga expert to Man United informed expert, and they wonder how that happened.
Strange.
We'll wait and see how Florian. No dig at Florian at all.
No, just a joke. It's just a joke.
No, I'm not. Yeah, just interesting how people become all of a sudden very informed. But nonetheless, we will see what happens as things develop. Is that it, Jamesy? Anything else, man?
That's all I got.
All right, my man. Thanks to all of you folks. I hope you're doing well mentally, physically, and otherwise. I hope everything's good. We'll talk to you again on Monday. Have a wonderful, safe weekend, and look forward to bringing you a show on Monday. All the best, folks. Take it easy, Jamesy.
See you later, everyone. Bye.
Good man. Bye.